There is a moment every night that most people pass through without noticing. It is not fully awake, and it is not fully asleep. Thoughts slow, but they don't stop. The body relaxes, but awareness remains. Time begins to feel different. This in-between state is one of the most mysterious conditions the human brain enters. And it happens to almost everyone every night. When you are not fully asleep, the brain is not shutting down. It is reorganizing. In this state, the brain reduces its attention to the outside world and increases attention to itself. External sensory input begins to fade. Internal signals grow stronger. The brain is changing modes. This transition is known scientifically as the hypnagogic state. But the experience itself has existed long before it had a name. People have described it as drifting, floating, fading, or slipping. Some describe vivid images. Others experience sudden thoughts. Some feel their body grow heavy or unreal. All of these experiences come from the same process. The brain is letting go of control in layers. The first system to change is attention. The brain stops actively scanning the environment. Instead of searching for new information, it begins filtering it out. Sounds feel farther away. Light becomes less important. The brain decides that survival does not require constant vigilance. But this decision is not absolute. The brain keeps one foot in waking reality, just in case. This partial vigilance is key. It explains why people can still hear their name or a sudden noise during this state. The brain is not asleep. It is waiting. During this transition, the prefrontal cortex begins to quiet. This region is responsible for logic, planning, and self-monitoring. As it becomes less active, thoughts lose structure. Ideas blend together. Associations form more freely. This is why thoughts in this state can feel random but meaningful. The brain is no longer enforcing strict rules. Another major change involves the thalamus. The thalamus acts as a gatekeeper for sensory information. As sleep approaches, it slowly closes the gate. Signals from the eyes, ears, and body are reduced. This does not happen all at once. The reduction is uneven. Some senses fade faster than others. Vision usually goes first. This is why imagery often appears even with closed eyes. The brain is no longer receiving strong visual input. It begins generating its own. These images are not dreams. They are fragments, incomplete scenes, shadows of thoughts. The brain is experimenting. This state is also where the brain begins memory processing. Throughout the day, experiences are stored loosely. At night, the brain decides what to keep. In the not fully asleep state, memories begin to surface. Random moments from the day. Old memories with emotional weight. Things you did not consciously think about. The brain is testing connections. It is seeing what links together. This is why strange combinations of ideas appear. The brain is reorganizing information. Not randomly, but not logically either. Emotion plays a strong role here. The amygdala remains active. Emotional memories surface more easily than neutral ones. This is why thoughts can feel vivid or intense. The brain prioritizes emotionally relevant material. This process is efficient. Emotion helps the brain decide what matters. Another major change involves time perception. When the brain loosens its grip on external reality, time becomes less linear. Moments stretch. Thoughts feel long. But only seconds pass. This distortion occurs because the brain is no longer tracking time precisely. Clock-based awareness fades. Internal experience becomes dominant. This is why people often think they were drifting for minutes when it was only moments. Or the opposite. The brain is no longer measuring time the same way. Another defining feature of this state is muscle relaxation. The brain begins reducing motor output. Muscles loosen. Movement feels unnecessary. Sometimes a sudden muscle twitch occurs. This is known as a hypnic jerk. It is the brain testing the body, ensuring that paralysis has not set in too early. These movements are normal. They are safety checks. The brain does not fully trust the transition. It confirms control before letting go. Breathing changes as well. It becomes slower, less deliberate. The brain shifts from voluntary to automatic control. This shift can feel noticeable. Some people become aware of breathing. This awareness can feel strange, but it is a sign that control is transferring. Another phenomenon common in this state is the feeling of falling. This sensation occurs when the brain's spatial mapping system partially disengages. The brain briefly loses reference points. It interprets the loss as movement. The sensation feels real because the brain uses the same circuits as actual motion. This is not imagination. It is misinterpreted internal feedback. The brain quickly corrects it, but the sensation can be startling. Auditory experiences are also common. Voices, sounds, music. These are not hallucinations in the pathological sense. They are internally generated sensory experiences. The brain is practicing. During sleep, it will create entire worlds. In this state, it begins warming up. The boundary between thought and perception becomes thinner. Another key feature of this state is reduced self-criticism. The inner narrator quiets. Thoughts feel less judged. Ideas flow without evaluation. This is why many creative insights occur here. Writers, artists, and scientists have described ideas arriving during this transition. The brain is freer. Constraints are lifted. The same mechanism that enables creativity also allows nonsense. Both come from reduced filtering. Some theories suggest that this state evolved as a testing ground, a place where the brain could explore ideas without risk, simulate scenarios, combine information, prepare for dreaming. This theory fits well with observed brain activity. EEG recordings show a shift from beta waves to alpha and theta waves. These patterns reflect relaxed but active processing. The brain is not idle. It is reorganizing. Another important element is the sense of self. As the prefrontal cortex quiets, the sense of I softens. Thoughts feel less attached to identity. This can feel pleasant or strange. The brain temporarily reduces self-reference. This allows deeper processing, but it can also feel unfamiliar. The feeling of drifting comes from this softening of self. The brain is stepping back from constant self-monitoring. Some people experience fear during this state, not because something is wrong, but because control is fading. The brain notices the loss of agency. Fear is a response to uncertainty. The same mechanisms that allow relaxation can trigger vigilance. This is why this state can feel calming one night and unsettling another. Context matters. Fatigue matters. Emotional state matters. Another layer involves learning. The brain is highly plastic in this state. Connections are more flexible. This is why repetition before sleep can be effective. Information presented during this time may be more easily integrated. The brain is primed for reorganization. There are also theories linking this state to subconscious processing. The brain surfaces material that has not been consciously addressed. This is not mystical. It is efficiency. During the day, attention is focused outward. At night, the brain processes inward. This is when unresolved material emerges. Some conspiracy-style interpretations suggest that this state opens access to hidden layers of consciousness. While there is no evidence for hidden knowledge, there is evidence of reduced filtering. The brain allows more content through. This can feel profound. The meaning comes from interpretation, not revelation. Still, the experience can feel significant, because it is rare during waking hours. The brain usually protects itself from overload. Here the guard is lowered. Another reason this state feels important is that it precedes sleep. Sleep is essential. The brain treats this transition seriously. It ensures systems are ready. Memory, emotion, motor control, perception. Everything is checked. Only when conditions are right does the brain allow deeper sleep. If conditions are not right, the brain stays here. This is why anxiety can keep people stuck in this state. The brain does not feel safe enough to proceed. Understanding this state helps reduce frustration. Being not fully asleep is not failure. It is part of the process. The brain moves through it naturally. Trying to force sleep often keeps the brain alert. Letting the state unfold allows the transition. As we continue, we'll go deeper into how this state connects to dreams, false awakenings, sleep paralysis, intuition, and why the brain sometimes lingers here longer than expected. When the brain lingers in this in-between state longer than usual, the experience can become especially vivid. Thoughts may feel layered. Images can appear with unusual clarity. Sounds may feel close or distant at the same time. This is not because the brain is confused. It is because different systems are transitioning at different speeds. Sleep is not a single switch. It is a cascade. Some regions of the brain enter sleep-like activity earlier than others. The sensory cortex may quiet while emotional centers remain active. The logical mind may soften while imagination strengthens. This uneven transition creates the strange richness of the not fully asleep state. One of the most fascinating changes during this time involves memory integration. The hippocampus begins replaying patterns from the day. These patterns are not replayed in order. They are fragmented. The brain pulls pieces of experience and tests how they connect. This replay helps strengthen important memories and weaken irrelevant ones. Emotion guides this process. Memories with emotional weight are replayed more often. This is why emotionally charged thoughts surface at night. The brain is tagging information, deciding what matters. Another effect of this replay is the feeling that thoughts are coming from nowhere. They feel uninvited. This happens because the prefrontal cortex, which normally initiates thought, is less active. Thoughts arise from deeper networks. They feel spontaneous. The brain is speaking to itself. This is why insights can feel sudden. The brain connects patterns beneath awareness. Another phenomenon common in this state is false awakening. This is the sensation of waking up without actually waking. The brain creates a realistic simulation of the environment. You may feel awake, but you are still in transition. This occurs when the dreaming system activates early. The brain tests perception. Darkness increases the likelihood of this experience because visual input is minimal. The brain fills in details. The experience feels real. Another closely related experience is sleep paralysis. When the brain activates dream imagery before releasing motor control, the body cannot move. The mind wakes into a dreaming brain. Fear can occur. But the experience itself comes from timing mismatch. The not fully asleep state is the doorway where these mismatches occur. Most of the time, transitions are smooth. Sometimes they are not. The brain corrects them quickly. Understanding this reduces fear. Another layer involves attention to internal sensations. Heartbeat, breathing, temperature. These signals become more noticeable. The brain is tuning inward. Normally, these sensations are filtered out. Here, the filter relaxes. This can feel intimate or uncomfortable. The brain monitors the body carefully during transitions, ensuring systems are stable. This monitoring can feel like hyper-awareness. Another fascinating aspect is how language changes. Words may lose structure. Sentences dissolve. Meaning becomes impressionistic. This reflects reduced activity in language centers. Communication is no longer required. The brain does not need to explain itself. It experiences directly. This is why thoughts can feel poetic or symbolic. The brain is operating in a different mode. Another important change involves inhibition. During waking life, the brain inhibits irrelevant thoughts. In this state, inhibition weakens. Thoughts that would normally be suppressed appear. This includes unusual ideas, fears, or insights. This does not mean these thoughts are truer. It means they are less filtered. This is why some people interpret this state as a source of truth. It feels raw, unedited, but interpretation matters. Not all thoughts deserve attention. The brain is experimenting. Another key point is that the brain remains sensitive to expectation. If you expect something to happen, the brain prepares. This can shape experience. For example, if someone fears sleep paralysis, the brain may remain alert. This alertness delays transition. Expectation influences physiology. This does not mean experiences are imagined. It means the brain is adaptive. Another theory suggests that this state evolved to allow gradual disengagement. Rather than shutting down suddenly, the brain eases into sleep. This reduces risk. Sudden unconsciousness would be dangerous. The in-between state allows the brain to reverse course if needed. If a threat appears, the brain can re-engage quickly. This is why the brain never fully lets go at first. Another interesting observation is that people who meditate can enter similar states while awake. Meditation reduces sensory input and quiets the prefrontal cortex. The brain enters a hypnagogic-like state. This similarity suggests that the state is not tied to sleep alone. It is a mode of consciousness, a mode where the brain prioritizes internal processing. Another factor is that the brain's sense of boundaries softens. The distinction between self and environment becomes less sharp. This can feel peaceful or disorienting. This softening comes from reduced activity in parietal regions that define spatial boundaries. Again, this is not mystical. It is neural. Another element involves dopamine. Dopamine activity changes during this state. Anticipation decreases. The brain stops seeking. This reduction in drive allows rest. But if dopamine remains high due to stress or excitement, the brain stays alert. The state stretches. Sleep is delayed. Understanding this helps explain why excitement keeps people awake. The brain is not ready to disengage. Another phenomenon is microdreaming. Short dream fragments appear. They are not fully immersive, but they are not thoughts either. They exist in between. The brain is testing dream generation, ensuring stability. This is like warming up an engine. Another theory suggests that the not fully asleep state allows emotional regulation. By replaying experiences without full awareness, the brain reduces emotional charge. This makes waking life more manageable. If this process is disrupted, emotional regulation suffers. This may explain why poor sleep affects mood. The brain did not finish its work. The sense that this in-between state holds meaning is something many people notice. Ideas feel important. Thoughts feel symbolic. The brain gives them a sense of weight. This happens because the emotional centers of the brain remain active while critical evaluation quiets. Meaning is felt before it is judged. This does not mean the ideas are always accurate. It means the brain is in a mode where relevance is emphasized over logic. Evolutionarily, this may have helped early humans consolidate lessons from experience. Patterns mattered more than precision. Another layer of this state involves time perception. Time becomes fluid. Moments stretch or compress. This occurs because the brain's timekeeping networks rely on attention. As attention drifts inward, external markers fade. The brain no longer tracks seconds. This is why minutes can feel like hours, or hours can pass unnoticed. Another phenomenon is the sensation of falling. This sudden jolt is called a hypnic jerk. It occurs when the brain detects rapid muscle relaxation. The brain briefly interprets this as loss of balance. A reflex fires. This is an ancient protective mechanism. It does not mean something is wrong. It means the brain is checking safety. This reflex is more common during stress or caffeine use. The brain remains vigilant. Another important system involved here is the thalamus. The thalamus acts as a sensory gatekeeper. During the not fully asleep state, the thalamus begins reducing sensory transmission. Sounds feel muffled. Touch feels distant. But the gate is not fully closed. This allows the brain to remain responsive. This partial shutdown creates the dreamlike quality of awareness. Another interesting change involves eye movements. Even with eyes closed, subtle movements occur. The brain is shifting visual processing inward. Internal imagery becomes dominant. External input fades. This shift marks the approach of deeper sleep. Another theory suggests that this state helps maintain identity continuity. By blending waking thoughts with dream imagery, the brain transitions smoothly. There is no abrupt loss of self. This reduces confusion upon waking. The brain values continuity. Abrupt transitions can be destabilizing. Another area of study focuses on the default mode network. This network is active during rest and introspection. During the in-between state, the default mode network becomes dominant. Self-referential thought increases. Memories surface. Scenarios play out. The brain reflects. This is not random. It is self-processing. Another curious feature is how fear can emerge without cause. Darkness, silence, reduced sensory input. The brain fills gaps. The amygdala remains active. Without context, uncertainty increases. This can create unease. Understanding this helps reframe nighttime fear. It is not danger. It is ambiguity. The brain dislikes ambiguity. Another reason this state feels intense is because multitasking ends. During the day, attention is divided. Here, attention narrows, one thought at a time. This focus increases intensity. Another phenomenon involves creativity. Many ideas arise during this state. The brain combines distant concepts. Connections form. This is because associative networks are free to interact. The brain is less constrained. This is why some people keep notebooks by their bed. Another factor is body temperature. The brain lowers temperature to initiate sleep. This cooling affects neuron firing rates. Thoughts slow. Sensations soften. The body prepares. Another system involved is the vestibular system. As muscle tone decreases, spatial orientation shifts. This can create floating sensations or spinning. Again, this is normal. The brain recalibrates. Another theory proposes that this state serves as a buffer zone, a space to resolve unfinished mental loops. If something is unresolved, the brain lingers here. This explains why anxiety prolongs the state. The brain keeps processing. Another key point is that this state is highly individual. Some people experience vivid imagery. Others feel nothing. This depends on neural sensitivity. Sleep architecture varies. There is no correct experience. Another interesting observation is that children spend more time in this state. Their brains transition slowly. Imagination remains strong. As adults, transitions speed up. But under certain conditions, the state returns. Stress, creativity, meditation, fatigue. Another layer involves hormones. Melatonin rises. Cortisol falls. These shifts influence perception. The world feels less urgent. Internal space expands. Another aspect is that learning continues. The brain can still absorb information. This is why audio can influence dreams. The brain remains receptive. This does not mean learning is efficient, but it is possible. Another phenomenon is sensory blending. Sounds may trigger images. Thoughts may feel tactile. This is mild synesthesia. Boundaries blur. The brain networks overlap. Another important idea is that resistance prolongs discomfort. Trying to control the state increases alertness. Letting the state unfold allows transition. This is not advice. It is observation. The brain moves towards stability. As this in-between state continues, the brain begins to reorganize its priorities. External awareness becomes secondary. Internal processing becomes primary. This shift is subtle. There is no clear moment where one ends and the other begins. The brain prefers gradients over switches. During this phase, the hippocampus becomes especially active. This structure plays a central role in memory. It begins reviewing recent experiences, not replaying them exactly, but extracting patterns. What mattered, what repeated, what carried emotional weight. This is why fragments of the day appear in drifting thoughts, not as full scenes, but as impressions. The brain is deciding what to keep. Another important change is the reduction of executive control. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and self-monitoring, quiets. This reduces self-judgment. Thoughts feel freer, less filtered. This is why ideas can feel profound, and why logic feels optional. The brain is not being careless. It is being efficient. Another phenomenon often reported is the sense of watching thoughts rather than creating them. This happens because the sense of agency softens. The brain generates content automatically. Awareness becomes more observational. This is similar to early meditation states, but unintentional. The brain naturally drifts here. Another layer involves auditory processing. Even faint sounds can feel exaggerated or suddenly disappear. The brain alternates between scanning the environment and withdrawing. This oscillation helps maintain safety. It is the brain asking, is it quiet enough to sleep? Another curious experience is the sudden appearance of faces, shapes, or scenes. These are not dreams yet. They are spontaneous visual constructions. The visual cortex is active, but not guided by narrative. These images are unstable. They appear and dissolve. This instability marks the boundary. Another theory suggests this state allows emotional regulation. By replaying feelings without context, emotional intensity decreases. The brain neutralizes emotional charge. This may explain why problems feel less urgent after sleep. The brain processes emotion before memory. Another feature is slowed language processing. Words lose structure. Sentences fragment. Meaning becomes impressionistic. This reflects reduced left hemisphere dominance. The brain shifts balance. Another phenomenon is the sensation of being very small or very large. This distortion comes from altered body schema. The brain temporarily loosens its internal map. Spatial boundaries blur. Again, this is normal. The brain is recalibrating perception. Another key process here is glymphatic activation. The brain's waste-clearing system begins to engage. Fluid flows increase. Metabolic byproducts are flushed. This requires reduced neural activity. The in-between state initiates this cleaning. It is maintenance mode. Another reason this state feels pleasant to some is dopamine modulation. Reward circuits soften. Expectation fades. There is no chasing, just presence. Another observation is that people often experience insights here. Sudden understanding. This occurs because distant neural networks communicate. The brain allows crosstalk. Constraints loosen. Connections form. Another aspect is heart rate variability. The nervous system shifts toward parasympathetic dominance. The body relaxes, but remains responsive. This balance is crucial. Another phenomenon is the feeling of being pulled inward, as if sinking. This reflects reduced sensory anchoring. The brain disengages from the physical map. Another theory proposes that this state evolved to protect against abrupt unconsciousness. Gradual descent allows safety checks. The brain ensures the environment is stable. Another experience is the sudden thought that you are about to fall asleep. That thought itself can trigger wakefulness. This is meta-awareness. Awareness noticing itself. This often resets the process. Not a failure, just feedback. Another observation is that this state becomes more vivid when one is overtired. The brain struggles to maintain boundaries. Imagery intensifies. Thoughts fragment. Another factor is light exposure. Darkness accelerates the transition. Light delays it. This is circadian signaling. Another interesting point is that this state can feel timeless, because the brain stops narrating. Narrative requires memory and anticipation. Both fade. Only sensation remains. Another subtle shift involves breathing. Breath becomes automatic. Attention drifts away from control. The brain trusts the body. Another phenomenon is the sense of being addressed, as if a thought speaks to you. This is internal dialogue losing ownership. The brain generates language without tagging it as self-produced. This can feel mysterious, but it is internal. Another theory suggests this state strengthens creativity by rehearsing novel associations. The brain tests combinations, keeps some, discards others. Another element is that fear can surface briefly, not because of danger, but because uncertainty increases. Understanding reduces fear. The brain prefers explanation. Another observation is that this state can feel deeply familiar, as if remembered. This is because the brain has entered it thousands of times. It is a nightly ritual, often unnoticed. Another idea is that this state represents the brain's last check of consciousness. Before letting go, it asks one question: is it safe to release control? When the answer is yes, deeper sleep follows. And when the answer is uncertain, the brain lingers. This lingering is not harmful. It is protective. As the process continues, awareness thins. Thoughts slow. Images fade. The brain prepares to cross into light sleep, where memory consolidation deepens, where consciousness recedes, and where the next phase begins. As this transition unfolds, the brain does not fall asleep all at once. Different systems disengage at different speeds. Conscious awareness is one of the last to loosen its grip. Beneath it, deeper processes are already underway. Neural firing becomes more synchronized. Instead of rapid, scattered signals, neurons begin to pulse together. This synchronization creates stability. It reduces noise. It allows the brain to shift from reacting to processing. During this stage, known as light sleep, the brain still responds to the environment. A sound can wake you. A movement can bring you back. But the threshold is rising. The brain is slowly closing the door. Memory systems become more selective. The hippocampus continues sorting information. Not everything is stored. Only what fits existing patterns. This explains why small details fade while emotions remain. The brain prioritizes meaning. Another subtle change is the emergence of sleep spindles. These are brief bursts of brain activity. They act like protective shields. They block external noise. They also support learning. Spindles help stabilize memories. They are signs that the brain is committing to sleep. At the same time, the brain reduces responsiveness to internal chatter. Thoughts lose narrative flow. They become fragments, then sensations, then silence. This is not emptiness. It is transition. Another process unfolding is the disengagement of the sense of self. The brain regions that maintain personal identity quiet. The feeling of I softens. This is why the boundary between observer and experience blurs. There is awareness but no commentary. This state is often described as peaceful, not because something is added, but because something is removed. Another important function here is emotional recalibration. The brain revisits emotional tone without context. Fear, excitement, sadness. These emotions are processed without story. This reduces their intensity. By morning they feel distant. This is not forgetting. It is integration. Another layer involves motor inhibition. The brain begins suppressing movement. Muscle tone decreases. This prevents acting out internal imagery. This process continues into dreaming. It begins early. Another phenomenon is auditory fading. The brain deprioritizes sound, but certain frequencies remain detectable. This is why a familiar voice can still wake you. The brain maintains a filter for relevance. Another observation is that this state often feels shorter than it is. The brain's internal clock has slowed. Minutes pass unnoticed. This temporal distortion is a hallmark of sleep onset. Another theory proposes that this phase helps dissolve cognitive rigidity. By loosening structure, the brain resets problem-solving patterns. This is why insights sometimes appear upon waking. The solution was not found consciously. It emerged from reorganization. Another aspect involves energy redistribution. The brain reduces energy consumption in higher-order areas. Resources shift to maintenance, repair, optimization. This is why sleep deprivation affects judgment first. The most energy-demanding systems suffer earliest. Another subtle shift is in sensory imagination. Imagery becomes less controllable. Scenes arise without intention. They drift. This marks the beginning of dream formation, but without story. Another factor is the reduced influence of gravity perception. As proprioceptive input fades, the sense of body position weakens. This can create floating sensations or expansion. These sensations are not symbolic. They are neurological. Another idea is that this state acts as a rehearsal space. The brain tests possible futures, not consciously, but through emotional simulation. This may aid decision-making. Another observation is that resistance delays this process. Trying to hold on to awareness keeps alert systems active. Letting go allows descent. This is not effort. It is absence of effort. Another key point is that this state is not fragile. Even if interrupted, the brain returns to it quickly. It is a preferred pathway. Another interesting detail is that this transition looks different across cultures. But the physiology is universal. Human brains share this rhythm. Another phenomenon is the sense of being on the edge of understanding, as if something important is about to be realized. This is because associative networks are active, but conclusions require waking cognition. The feeling remains unresolved. Another aspect is that this state can feel deeply personal, yet it is entirely biological. The brain creates familiarity through repetition. Another theory suggests this state evolved to ease the shock of unconsciousness. Gradual fading protects continuity. Another layer is the influence of circadian timing. At the right biological time, this transition is smooth. Outside it, the brain resists. Another observation is that dreams do not begin suddenly. They grow from these fragments. Images stabilize. Narrative emerges. But consciousness has already stepped aside. Another important function is sensory recalibration. By temporarily disengaging from external input, the brain resets sensitivity. Morning perception feels sharper. Another subtle change is the quieting of internal dialogue. Words lose importance. Meaning becomes nonverbal. This is why the state feels ineffable, hard to describe. Another phenomenon is that memory encoding shifts from explicit to implicit. Skills are reinforced, patterns strengthened, facts weighed. Another aspect is the brain's tolerance for ambiguity increases. There is no need for answers. This is why worries lose urgency. Another observation is that this state can feel safe, because the brain has assessed the environment. Safety permits surrender. Another final shift occurs when consciousness dissolves completely. There is no moment you remember, only absence, and then later waking. The brain has crossed the threshold. What felt like drifting was preparation. What felt like fading was organization. This in-between state is not a void. It is one of the busiest moments the brain experiences. Quiet on the surface, active beneath. Every night, the brain performs this transition, whether noticed or not. And every night, it prepares the mind to release control, to rest, to reset, and to begin again.